Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Meridian Planning and Zoning Commission for the date of March 5th, 2020, and we'll start with roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Pitzer?
Here.
Commissioner Grove?
Here.
Commissioner McCarville?
Here.
Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Absent are Commissioners Seal, Casanelli, and Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. The only note is that we will be opening item A on the agenda for the purpose of a continuance. They are requesting a continuance, but otherwise the agenda is the same. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion's approved. And then we've also got the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve, which has the approve the minutes of the February 2020, or February 20th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, as well as the findings of fact, conclusions of law for Day Wireless, H-2019-0115. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. At this point in time, I'll explain the public hearing process for the evening. We're going to open up each item individually and start with a staff report. The staff will report their findings regarding how the application adheres to our comprehensive plan and our uniform development code with the staff's recommendation. After the staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward and present their case to the commission and for approval of their application and respond to any staff comments. The applicant will have 15 minutes to do so. After the applicant's finished, we will open up the floor for public testimony. There is a sign up in the back on an iPad as you entered. And if you wish to testify tonight, please go ahead and sign in on that iPad as you enter the room. If any individuals here and they're speaking for a larger group, such as an HOA, we'll ask for a show of hands at that time for individuals that want to testify on their behalf. And those folks that raise their hands will give up their time for that representative to speak for up to 10 minutes representing the larger group. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to have a chance to respond to public testimony and close the discussion. At that time, we'll close the public hearing, and commissioners will have a chance to deliberate to make a recommendation to City Council or make a decision on the application. So with that, we're going to open tonight the public hearing for Hills Century Farm North, which is H-2019-0134. And they are requesting a continuance. So I don't know if staff had any additional comments, but certainly would welcome the applicant to come forward and make their request.
Madam Chair, Commission members, Mike Wardle, Director of Planning for Brighton Corporation, 2929 West Navigator in Meridian. Obviously, we're not here because we want to be here asking for a continuance. Bill, if you would, yes. And let me just, can you give me control so that I can, I've got control? It's not advancing. I need to go to the last slide. If you could, two more. Okay, there you go. Over the course of the last 15 months, we've actually had several actions. You approved a modification of the development agreement about a year ago, as did the City Council. We've had 3 neighborhood meetings, and 2 specifically for the project that we currently have in queue. That was in July and in November. And during those 3 neighborhood meetings associated with this property, we've had an average of 5 people attend. And so what we did was 108 days ago today, we filed an application. Staffing issues and so forth kept it from getting to you in a more timely manner. But when we posted the site and the 2 white, red outlined arrows show the two principal posting locations. Those were posted in a timely manner. They were actually initially posted on the opposite corner, and the first day, I happened to be in Lisbon, Portugal, and opened up my emails after an all-night flight, and I saw the pictures as they were posted, and I immediately contacted staff and said, they're in the wrong locations, get them moved, and they got them moved in a timely manner. The circled white and black outlined arrow shows a stub street, and quite frankly, I didn't even think about the stub street. So we had a sign placed, but again, the sign company put it on the opposite corner. So by the time we got that sign in that location, it was 9 days in advance of the hearing. So that's the technical issue. And I met with staff on Monday when I got back and indicated that we would be requesting, since the technicality kept us from this hearing, we would be requesting continuance to the next agenda. And staff has indicated, as the clerk, that it looks to be a full agenda. But just as this particular situation pulls an item off an application, you never know. So we are requesting a continuance to the next meeting, which would be, I believe, the 19th of March. And we will take our chances knowing that we will be the last item on the agenda. But given the fact that it took us 108 days to get here, we need to move as expeditiously as we can. So with due respect, we ask for your continuance to the next regular meeting. And we will direct our sign people to go out and renotice the dates so that anybody in the neighborhood would be fully aware that there has been a change. And at the conclusion of my comments and your decision, I'm going to voluntarily meet with anybody from the neighborhood in the foyer just to bring them up to speed on what the circumstances are. But I would note that each of the neighborhood meetings that we've never had any expressed opposition. They were questions that were answered for what largely is an age-qualified gated community. So again, with due respect, we ask for continuance to the next regular meeting. Happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you clarify for us how many items we have on the agenda for the next meeting?
Madam Chair, for March 19th, we currently have 6 hearings. And then on April 2nd, we currently have 4 hearings.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Anyone from the commission have a question? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to look at my fellow commissioners. I know the request from the applicant is for March 19th. I know staff tries to do what they can not to have more than 5 or 6 applications because otherwise they can be pretty lengthy meetings for us.
Madam
I will
Chair.
look to you all.
Okay.
Commissioner McCarville.
I would not be opposed to the 19th, as the applicant said, things tend to drop occasionally, and I don't see going into spring, I mean, you get 6 versus 4. I don't know. I think it's been a while since we've had a long meeting anyway. One of the super long ones. I personally wouldn't be opposed to it.
One of my thoughts, I am certainly sympathetic to the applicant. It's always unfortunate when you've got a small little piece that got missed on where a sign's posted. I know we also are a little bit light on staff, so I worry a little bit about our staff load for getting 7 applications in for next meeting.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner McCarville?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, though, is this one ready to go anyway for staff, or is this additional load for you guys?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner McCarville, it's not an easy answer. I mean, is anything ready to go these days? Everyone would like it to be ready to go as soon as it hits our desk. But we had a chance to meet with the applicant. Certainly we understand their time constraints. We've talked about it as staff. Now certainly Our preference is, I think our guidance to you is as meetings get late into the evening. We didn't know if the commission was going to have a cutoff date at some point and want to bump things out. If we start getting too late into the evening, is 11 o'clock going to be your timeline? And then eventually they could get bumped at that point and take that chance with that, as the applicant alluded to. I can tell you that the 19th hearing has 2 multifamily projects, and Delano's coming back before you on that agenda, which was pretty controversial hearing, and so it was remanded back to you with a redesign. So I think if again, the decision's yours. If you guys want to think you can handle that many projects on that hearing, staff will do what we need to do to get the work done and get it prepped and get it ready to go. Yes, we have the application process. It's in the queue. We have it scheduled for a hearing. Our intent was always to keep it on this hearing, but again, we had a technicality. But again, it's your purview. If you guys want to go and have that many items on a hearing, we'll readjust schedules and see what we can do. But if not, I can tell you right now what we have in the queue. It's ramping up too. So you're going to start seeing more and more agendas getting fuller and fuller. And so we've got to be cautious on what we do moving forward and how we schedule our time.
I guess that was going to be my next question too, is what is on the agenda? I hadn't looked.
Commissioner Pitzer, do you have a comment?
Yeah, if it's 3 subdivision, I think
Commissioner
that's a
Pitzer.
load.
Yeah, thank you. So it looks like we have 3 that are conditional use permits, and we have 1, 2, 3, 2 of them that are subdivisions for the comprehensive plan. But the following were 2, we already have 3 that are all subdivisions. I would not be opposed to doing a 319.
One other thought too is if we did want to put it on March 19th, you could always put a cap on the time, that we wouldn't go past a certain time if we got there.
I think that's not a bad idea going forward. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville, you're just fine. Any other thoughts, Commissioner Grove? With that, I will let one of you take a stab at making a motion if you'd like for when that gets moved to.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
I move that we can, we're continuing, right?
Correct.
File number H 2019-0134 to the March 19th meeting due to signage issue.
Commissioner McCarville, did you want to mention anything about time restrictions on this one?
I think
Or just play it by ear?
as long as it doesn't go past midnight, I don't know. I mean, I think that's something maybe we need to maybe set offline. I mean, I think just in general going forward, that's probably not a bad idea to have us set on the meetings.
Just to clarify, your motion is to move it to the hearing date of March 19th. We're not putting a time cap on it right now, but,
Yeah, pending discussions on a time cap.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to continue the public hearing for Hills Century Farm North to the hearing date of March 19th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Next, we're going to open up the public hearing for Meridian Station, which is H-2019-0142. And I know that there's a number of you in the room that are here to see what happens with this application. So I'm going to give a little bit of a brief summary of what we discussed in our last meeting and kind of where we're at right now. We had made a motion in our last meeting that we would be opening up tonight, not for public comment, but we would just be opening up for commission deliberation, and that we would be able to ask the applicant questions if we had anything. But I think we'd like to start with just commission deliberation, and if we have a need to bring the applicant up forward to ask questions or ask staff any questions, we can certainly do that. If we do open up the hearing for the applicant to make a presentation or present anything new, we would likely have to open it up for public testimony, because typically you can't have anything new without having the public be able to comment on it. So I would just make that note of caution. if possible, I believe the intent of the motion last time was to just ask questions if we had anything we wanted to clarify from the applicant. So in front of us is a request for a conditional use permit because there's a development project that would like to construct 200-foot tall vertically integrated buildings, which exceeds the maximum height in the OT zoning district of 75 feet. So really, the only thing that we are here to approve is the height variance that they're requesting. They would be allowed to do their project in 75 feet. What we discussed last time is really whether or not that height made sense for this specific downtown project. And we did receive 15 new pieces of written testimony, so thank you to all of those who have written in. We do read all of those letters and those notes, and it's very helpful as we deliberate up here. So we really appreciate your involvement, and your presence being here tonight means a lot to us. Just to recap, 14 out of 15 of those were in favor of the height modification. One of those was opposed. And we did certainly have some other businesses testify last time that gave some concerns about parking. But that was the main concerns that we talked about was parking and whether or not height of 75 feet was adequate, or if we should be able to allow this one to have a 100-foot height. So at this point, we could certainly keep the hearing open if you'd like to discuss, so that way we can bring the applicant up if we have any specific questions. If we need to go through the project in more depth, I can certainly have staff give another overview if we'd like to do that. I know Commissioner McCarville, you had a chance to read through the minutes from the last meeting.
Yes.
All 100 and
29
some pages of it.
Just this one. I didn't read the whole meeting.
All right.
I did read this application.
I don't know if anybody would like to kick us off on that discussion or give another recap of your thoughts, but I'd certainly open it up for that. Commissioner Grove? I don't have to put you on the spot yet.
I don't have anything yet. I would like to hear from Commissioner McCarville on her thoughts of on what she saw in the application, since we've already had a chance to weigh in.
Commissioner McCarville?
Madam Chair, I actually really like the project. I know it's something new and different from what we normally have been accustomed to. The only thing that tall we're used to seeing around here is grain elevators and stuff. But I think the frontage is pretty, the open space, the green space, the parking, I think would be a welcome idea. I do think, I saw some comments, fearful that apartments would have the 2 and 3 and guests and all that. And while that is usually true, I think from what I've seen in other downtowns, the people that usually live downtown tend to edit their vehicles and that kind of thing. If you're going to want massive amounts of vehicles, live somewhere else. I think it would be a nice change and provide a lot of things that downtown Meridian needs to make it a vibrant downtown. The walkability and having that density in the downtown is what makes, I think, the businesses thrive. It's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I'm just going to recap a couple of the reasons I was in favor of the project as well. When you get a project like this, I think the applicant's gone above and beyond in the number of parking stalls proposed, because that's always the biggest concern we get when it comes to a big project like this, especially when there's multiple stories involved and there's lots of apartments involved. The applicant gave us a mix last time of the number of units that were going to be in there, and there was primarily one bedroom and studio apartments as kind of the main chunk of it. There were a few 2-bedroom apartments, but it seemed pretty reasonable for the amount of parking stalls that they were creating. But in general, they only had 414 parking stalls that would be required by code, and they proposed 659, which is 245 stalls more than required. And in the meantime, they'll also have a surface lot that's kind of up in the front. So when you look at downtowns, I mentioned this comment last time, but I've attended a lot of webinars on downtown development projects and what's good and bad. And one of the comments made is if you have a parking problem, you're doing something right in your community because it means there's a reason for people to come to your downtown. So this would help alleviate a challenge of having a parking problem and also give more reasons for people to come downtown together. But having 245 extra stalls makes me feel a lot better about the project. And if we were to restrict their height just back down to the 75, if I was in the developer's shoes, the first thing I would get rid of is a lot of those parking stalls. Because that's not where they make their money. They're doing that as a benefit to the community, in my opinion. So that was a couple of my thoughts. I'm in favor of a 100-foot tall building because where you want to have the density and where you want to have the height is in your downtown core. It doesn't make sense to put it in the residential neighborhoods. It doesn't make sense to put it really anywhere else except for a few pockets like the 10-mile development that's going up where it's planned for those office towers. But your downtown's really where you want to see the density. And I would almost rather have, if we move forward with approving this conditional use permit, I would almost make a recommendation that we also ask city council to reconsider what the height should be in our downtown long-term. Because that was the question we kind of went back and forth on too, was, well, if 75 was the number, why don't we stick with 75? But it's been a number of years since it was set at 75, and I think there's some new design standards out there, and perhaps our city would like to take a more look at that. Because I remember in the comprehensive plan committee, and I know the Downtown Meridian Development Corporation has put together a great plan on what they envision for downtown, and there's certainly some elements of raising height and bringing in density. So that's my summary. Commissioner Grove, do you want to add anything else?
I'd echo most everything you said there. I think the opportunity for this project to be able to move forward helps the downtown create some of the building bones that we just lack from previous generations to really revitalize downtown. When you hear about downtown revitalization, there's typically something to, renovate, move into, change, and we just don't have a lot of those structures in our downtown. So we are very limited in how successful downtown can be based on the limited amount of space available to make those changes. And taking a blighted area like the railroad property and being able to repurpose it with something to this scale, I think is vitally important for not only the short term, but the long-term health of our downtown. And it's painful because it's change, but it's change that will benefit the business owners of downtown and the community as a whole. I really like this project, and I like the idea of approving the 100-foot height limit on this building.
Commissioner Pitzer, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I love the concept. I was the one that was opposed to this at the last meeting, but I like the concept. I like the courtyard, the open space, having the additional retail space. What I was opposed to especially was asking for a 33% change. But I have to sit here in reflection and say, is this good for Meridian? I mean, that's basically what we're here for, and why we make our recommendations to council. And I think in looking over everything, I'd have to say that, yes, this is probably in the best interest of Meridian. I don't like the height. I think it's going to eclipse everything around here, but maybe that's short term. And I think that if we set this precedent and let this go through at 100 feet, I think we absolutely have to ask for a change in the comp plan.
With that, if anybody wanted to ask a specific question, we certainly have the meeting open. We could ask the applicant to come forward if anyone had a specific question for them, or if we feel like we're all on the same page, which it sounds like we are all heading in that same direction. I would accept a motion to close the public hearing so we could make a further motion of recommendation, or in this case, actually, we make a final decision on this since it's a conditional use permit, but we would need to close the public hearing first. So can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, moved and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I would accept a motion at this point as well, unless there's further discussion you'd all like to have on Meridian Station.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2019-0142 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 5th with no modifications.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve the Meridian Station's request for the height variance, H-2019-0142. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. With that, we will move on to the next one. And thank you to all of you who showed up tonight. It's always great to see the public show up in making comments on projects, so we really appreciate that. So next, we're going to move on to item C, which is the public hearing continued from February 20th, 2020 for handy truck line silos, which is H-2019-0149. And we are also going to open that with the findings of facts, conclusions of law. I know that's a little bit atypical for this one, but we're going to open those together. And I'll start with a staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Next item on the agenda this evening is the Handy Truck Lines conditional use permit. As you mentioned, it was continued from the 2020 Planning and Zoning, or 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission for the purpose, for the reason being that they did not get the site posted within the parameters of the UDC. The applicant is here again to discuss a conditional use permit to increase the height of some silos that they want to construct on the site. The property is currently zoned industrial within the city of Meridian, and you can see in the zoning map and the future land use map that majority of the property around this site is also zoned industrial. And there are also industrial uses that are occurring around it. So it's kind of this enclave of industrial around our railroad tracks in close proximity to our downtown area. Right now, the applicant is currently operating with a construction business there. These silos are primarily for the purpose of having concrete powder in, housing concrete powder. The proposed silos would be located within the railroad corridor and their right-of-way. So there was no permission needed, or the property owner doesn't own the land, but they have a lease agreement with the Union Pacific Railroad to operate and conduct their business. So like the previous application that you just took action on, this is one of those cases where a certain height limit is allowed at an administrative level. If you're under 20% or up to 20% can be approved through the staff level. But because the IL zone has a height limit of 50 feet and they're asking to go up to 80 feet, they exceed the 20% allowed under the administrative process. So that's why we're really here to talk with you this evening and get your blessing of this. You can see here they've provided some elevations of what the silos will look like. Typically, we have design standards that go along with all of our commercial industrial buildings, but in this particular case, if you had a chance to read the staff report, we made a finding that this is really just more of a function of the business rather than actual habitable building, not your typical commercial building. So the applicant's going to only have to come before staff with a certificate of zoning compliance and forego the design review process if they obtain approval of this CDC or this CUP application. Staff did receive written testimony from Scott Hanks, who is the applicant, and they are in agreement with all conditions in the staff report. Staff is recommending approval, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for staff? With that, would the applicant like to come forward and share a few words with us? If you wouldn't mind, please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, so I am not Scott Hanks. He unfortunately cannot make it. My name is Branson Handy. My current address is 8364 Creighton Drive in Boise. As proposed, Madam Chairman and the Commission, these two silos will be directly adjacent to the existing ones, and they will be the same height. So the original silos that were built are that 80 feet, and we're asking for permission to build two adjacent silos to that same height. So, yeah, if you have any questions, will do my best to answer.
Any questions for the applicant? You got off easy. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone signed in to testify on this application, Madam Clerk?
Madam Chair, we have one person signed in. That's Lindsay Anderson.
Lindsay, are you here? Would you like to testify? No hands. Is there anybody else in the room that would like to testify on this application? And with that, I don't think the applicant has anything else to add. So I would take a motion to close the public hearing for Handy Truck Lines 2019-0149.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are here for deliberation. In my thoughts looking at this, it seems pretty straightforward that they're just putting in two additional towers next to some existing towers that are going to be similar in height. I don't see a big concern with it being restrictive to public view. It's in an industrial area. It's next to the rail line. That's really where these kind of things fit most anyway. So I don't know that I have any big concerns over it, but would love your thoughts. Anyone want to go next? Commissioner Grove?
Madam Chair, to me, it looks, like you said, pretty straightforward. It completes the little block that they have of other silos, so I don't see any issues with it.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
I'm in support of this as well. I don't see an issue with it. It's adding to what's already there.
Any other comments? Commissioner Pitzer?
No.
With that, I would, this is a conditional use permit, and I would ask that anyone making the motion on this would also, assuming we're not making any changes or modifications to it, that we could also include the approval of the findings of facts, conclusions of law for handy truck line silos with the approval of the CUP.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2019-0149 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 5th, 2020. In addition, approving the findings of fact and conclusions of law and decision and order for the same file number.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the public hearing for Bannock Ridge, H-2019-0143, and we'll start with the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Next item on the agenda is the Bannock Ridge subdivision. This is a preliminary plat and development agreement modification. If, as you're aware, you are a recommending body on the plat, and the City Council will take action on the development agreement modification. This property was annexed and zoned in 2017 and platted as part of a larger project called Bannock Ridge. And now the applicant wants to come forward and bifurcate this property from the original plat and boundary of that project and enter into a new development agreement, which council will take under consideration. The property is currently zoned R4, which is consistent with the current land use designation of low-density residential for this property. So we can anticipate densities of 3 units or less to the acre, and this project is well below that. On the graphic on your left there, you can see where it was the larger portion of that Bannock Ridge in 2017. So the applicant and the elevations that were tied to that development agreement. So the applicant is here tonight to discuss just doing a subdivision on 4.35 acres of land, which is being removed from the additional 13.58 acres that was approved in 2017. The preliminary plat consists of 10 building lots and 5 common lots in the R4 district. One of the lots will contain the existing residence and the outbuildings that are currently on Lot 10. Block 1. Staff had made mention in the staff report that some of the dimensional standards on this particular property did not meet the R4 standards, and they'll have to comply with that at the time that they submit their final plat. Because this project is below the 10-acre minimum, there is no required open space for the project as required in the UDC, but the applicant is required to extend the 10-foot multi-use pathway that through the site. Because the existing home, I mean, staff's preference is to have the pathway along the creek, but given the site constraints and the fact that the existing residence is remaining on Lot 10, Block 1, we work closely with our Parks Department to ensure that we could route it through the development, have an on-street segment, and then run along the south boundary behind the proposed buildable lots with this subdivision. This is pretty consistent with the previous approval as well. You can see here that there is a stub street on the west boundary that's going to be extended with this development and stub to the south for future connectivity with the adjacent properties. And that's kind of the finding of what we try to do when we were working with the applicant. Staff, when we initially started with this project, we weren't keen on separating this piece from the larger piece of the property. We wanted to make sure that all of this came in and was a cohesive development plan, and that's why the DA was in place to make sure all of it developed at one time. But because the applicant's extending the street and it's generally consistent to what's already in the DA, staff felt comfortable with the plat that you're seeing before you this evening. The applicant has also provided some sample elevations for you. The majority of them are single story. The applicant hasn't determined whether or not they're going to do any other additional 2 stories, but there's nothing prohibiting them to do that as a recommended DA provision or a condition of approval. But I also mentioned to you, because at the time that this came in, or excuse me, some of the lots will be taking access from a common driveway. So as you can see here, the plat depicts this as a private street. It's not. It's actually a common driveway. And the code allows up to 6 homes to take access from a common driveway. So that's why you see the turnaround on the 2 buildable lots for fire department requirements. Staff did receive written testimony from Dan Lardy in agreement with all the conditions in the staff report. Staff finds that this project is consistent with the development agreement and the comprehensive plan, and we ask for your approval or recommend approval this evening, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Questions? At this time, I would ask the applicant to come forward. And if you wouldn't mind, state your name and address for us. Appreciate it.
Madam Commissioner, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Dan Lardy, 11 Associates, 1324 First Street South, Nampa, Idaho, 83687. So, Bill, thanks. I appreciate the lead in here. You did a good job. The question that I have, and I did send an email in and said that I agreed with the conditions. The one condition that I do have a question on is the fencing. If I do, and can I get a question for Bill on clarifying that as far as what's required there?
Madam Chair, members of the
Thanks, Bill. Go
commission,
ahead.
we'll have a conversation here. So Dan, what in specifics are to the fencing question? Or what specific
So
condition?
is that along the entire path? And then
Okay.
if it is along the entire path, can it be done at the time of home construction? Sorry, Commissioners.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, if I can address you. So essentially, as I said in the presentation, the pathway comes in through the site and then runs along the back of those buildable lots. In our code, the code requires the developer to put in the fencing at the time of the subdivision approval because we don't want homeowners putting in incorrect fencing. That violates our code. Some of you have had experience dealing with that throughout the years with the numerous projects that we've come through, and we've since changed. A few years ago, we changed our fencing ordinance to be more flexible in the standards and the type of fencing that would allow along a common lot. So a quick answer is no, it can't go in with the buildable lots. It needs to happen with the subdivision improvements per the city code. But there are fencing options for that to happen. I think your concern is that it's going to get destroyed when you're constructing homes on it.
That and the initial cost, I think, just to, again,
Yeah,
sorry, Madam Commissioner.
The code requires the developer to put that in.
Okay.
So I will continue, Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Please do.
So it is 9 buildable lots plus the existing home. It's a very simple. It fits with the nature of what's there. At one point in time, the development agreement was in place for the entire 13 acres, and since some homeowners aren't interested in developing just yet. So with that, I think it's a nice addition to the area, and it follows the comprehensive plan, land use. So with that, I can stand with any questions.
So one question I had, the way that the middle drive aisle comes down, the Mesa Court, it looks like,
Yes.
originally it was proposed to kind of come up from the south, not from the east. So I don't know if your group is the one that's still part of the development that'll happen to the south at some point in the future when those other homes want to redevelop. How would that affect the overall, I mean, it's not going to be part of the development agreement anymore, but would you envision that the rest of the plan would stay somewhat consistent with what was originally submitted for the Bannock Ridge subdivision?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I believe that in order to be get the most efficient use of the land, the previous development or the previous layout would still hold true and still can be done. It will look a little bit different, such as it does now. But the extension of the street to the east, as it extends through, and it will want to connect into Loggers Pass like it did before. So it'll still allow for development along those north lots and still allow for a stub road down to the south. So still cohesive.
Okay. And then one other question too is lot number 2 that's in that block 2 right on the elbow curve.
Yes.
Coming down, that was, I think, originally proposed as an open space lot in the overall concept. And I know that we're taking this into consideration as a separate plat, but would that become a home site now, or would that still be an open space?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, so on that particular lot, it is a buildable lot now. Before, we were using it for storm drainage because the whole site was draining there. Now it's only 4 acres out of 13. So, and that's the reason why it's a buildable lot. There is some comments probably in your packet from ACHD, and we're still discussing that particular area. ACHD has requested a full-blown cul-de-sac there.
Okay.
A little more to do on there.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
Madam Chair?
Commissioner McCarville?
Yeah. So we're taking this out of the original, if we do that, you're not required to put any amenities and green space and all that because of you're under the acreage, but would these homes still be able to use, are they still going to be considered part of the rest of the development and be able to use their amenities?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McCarville, as far as I know, they're probably not going to be developed by the same developer, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
The middle homeowner is I won't say holding out, but is one
Not
that's
ready.
resistant to the development. So I don't know.
One more follow-up question for you too. So it's hard to see green space on here, and I know you're not required to provide any because of the size. I know you've got the pathway that comes down, but are any of these lots open space lots, or are they all home sites?
Madam Commissioner, they are all home sites, except for the pathway and its required landscape on both sides.
Okay.
There is also 10 Mile Creek that's open. It's meant to be left open. Again, it's the creek.
Sure.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Grove?
In the packet and with staff report, it was indicated that an agreement needs to be in place with the HOA to the west to continue that pathway. Is that something that has been done, or do you see being an issue?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Grove, so in order to connect to that path, yes, we do have to connect and get an agreement with the HOA. Has it been done? No, it hasn't. I'm going to assume that the homeowners there would appreciate the fact that it would extend and provide them connectivity to the east, other than they have now.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
other than the fencing, are you in agreement with all staff recommendations?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McCarville, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Pitzer, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. What size is of the smallest lot that you have on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Pitzer, I don't want to mess it up. The smallest lot shown on this plat is 8,001 square feet.
Any follow-up question?
Thank you.
I think that might be it for now, but
All right.
we'll see you in a few minutes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone signed in to testify tonight on this application?
Madam Chair, we have 3 people signed in, 2 of which wish to testify, the first being Anik Binford.
Okay. Anik, if you want to come forward. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address again for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Anik Binford, 3101 Mesa Way. My husband and I own the property south of the proposed subdivision, and just for the record, we're not resistant to development. We're not opposed in any way, but we do have 2 concerns about this project. The first is the lack of substantial buffering between the public walking path and the full length of our entire property. The second is the impact on our ability to effectively irrigate our land. The Pathways Master Plan states the city should be sensitive to private owners when trails are proposed adjacent to private property. The city acknowledges that pathway safety is a major concern, and I'm quoting, of both pathway users and those whose property is adjacent to a pathway. Of the 8 safety concerns identified in the master plan, 2 issues impact us the most: privacy and trespassing. According to the master plan, one of the city's recommended improvements to address privacy of adjacent owners includes the use of good neighbor fencing and planting of landscape buffers. The city's recommended improvements to address trespassing is to clearly distinguish public pathways from private property with vegetative buffers and the use of good neighbor fencing. The current fencing will not discourage trespassing. Half of the fence is 3-pole fencing, which can easily be slipped through onto our property. Also, much of it is being held up with wire and baling twine. This does not provide a high degree of maintenance that would discourage undesirable activity along the pathway. The Pathways Master Plan acknowledges that loss of privacy and increased risk of trespassing are true concerns when public paths are adjacent to private property. We ask that the developer heed the city's recommended improvements as outlined in the master plan to provide good neighbor fencing and a more substantial vegetative buffer. We also have irrigation concerns. We recognize it's our responsibility to control our water. However, flood irrigation is not exact. Currently, we're able to fully irrigate the high areas of the pasture by running the water for a longer time. Overflow from low areas simply waters the connecting pasture. But when that connecting pasture becomes a walking path in private homes, we'll have to shut off water as soon as the lower areas are saturated. This will leave some of the areas literally high and dry. This will result in areas of unusable ground for us. We propose that the developer construct a berm to stop any overflow water from leaving our property so we may continue to irrigate sufficiently and responsibly. So basically, to sum it up, for our 2 concerns, we're requesting a good neighbor fence and more substantial vegetative buffer on the pathway. This will clearly distinguish the public property from our private property and also discourage trespassing and address privacy issues. We're also requesting a berm to allow us to continue to effectively irrigate our full property. We'd also like to note that when Observation Point subdivision was developed on our west border, the city recommended that the developer construct a 3-foot landscaped berm with a fence, which he did. When Cabela Creek was developed to our east, the city recommended a landscaped berm to address headlights from the new road into our home, and the developer provided that. In each case, the city heard our concerns regarding development impact, and we are hopeful for a similar response tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I had pictures, I didn't get to them, but my husband is up after me, so maybe can he use those pictures?
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Matthew Binford.
And Matthew, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Name's Matt Binford. I live at 3101 Mesa Way, and we are the 5 acres that adjoin this property. Can we go to a couple more slides forward? Oh, I can do it. So this is the west-facing observation side of what was developed. My wife referenced that there's a 3-foot berm here plus a fence. And in fact, when Observation Point went in, the irrigation, they actually added tile drainage across this back so we could continue to flood irrigate. So, you know, the city helped push us for that, and we really appreciate that. What we're hoping is something similar, and let me go forward here. This is actually the fence between the developer, the proposed development, and our property. You can see this fence is about ready to fall down. So my wife and I are concerned that the developer is not proposing any new fence here, that we would bear the burden of kind of protecting our property versus this walking path. So I don't know that that's a fair assessment. What we're asking for is not for the irrigation so much, but to berm this up so we can continue to irrigate, but also there needs to be something that kind of protects our property from their development and the, as my wife quoted, the issues with a walking path. So we'd like to see, we understand that it can't be a closed fence. We'd love to have just a solid vinyl fence there, but the city encourages open fences for crime and that sort of thing. But we would like to see a new fence here by the developer to kind of protect our property and people from going through this, broken down fence that they're not going to improve as part of this project. And I think that, we shouldn't bear the burden of a development coming in. And if the walking path goes along here, we're going to have to maintain this fence because my guess is those homeowners will not. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, anyone else signed in to testify?
No one else signed up to testify.
Is there anyone else here that would like to testify on this application? We've got a couple back here. If you want to come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Which microphone?
Either one works
Okay.
fine. Just talk into one of them.
Okay, I'm Celeste Blackburn. Address is 2978 South Novara Way. I'm in the development Cabela Creek that was put in adjacent to all these beautiful pictures. I saw my home in one of these pictures. Anyway, I don't have anything formal prepared. My only concern would be our current walking path in Cabela Creek and the current walking path in Observation Point go right along the creek. I'm not sure why we need to move a walking path up a few feet and around some houses to connect it. I don't know why they can't just go along the creek side and keep it as it has been with both subdivisions. My other concern is that the original CCNRs for this subdivision, which is called something estates, it starts with a K, says that all building lots within that subdivision have to be 30 feet away from each other, and I'm not sure that the plot that is proposed would meet that. I know when the original proposal was going around with the 3 lots, that they did come around with a petition to lift that, but as far as I am concerned, I do not know that that was lifted.
Thank you. And to address those concerns real quick, I think this specific application is requesting to change the development agreement, which would take them out of whatever initial group there is. I'm not sure which subdivision you're talking about, but maybe Bill could answer that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, she's speaking, I think you're talking specifically to CCNRs, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, this won't change that. The developer's still going to have to work on that if they haven't to
Yeah.
get that cleared up. But trying to think of the best path forward to take forward. It's in the city now. CCNRs, those were created through the county, so it's something that's going to have to happen privately, not between the city and
Okay.
and the applicant.
Thanks for explaining, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. And we had one other one back here that wanted to testify. State your name and address for the record for us. We appreciate it.
Jamie Clausen, 3010 South Glacier Bay Way. So I'm never done this before. Just a couple of things. I live off of the observation point. I'm in the Glacier Springs development, which is right behind or next to, however you want to view it. And we had a few concerns. One of them is regarding the developer, because did have the community meeting. They called it at a time of day when nobody could attend. They had it in a place where there was no room, really. They did not provide a space for us to truly meet. They had the restaurant, the little pub restaurant, had to come up with a space for us to even gather. And their wording to us was, we weren't expecting anybody to show up to this. They never do, which I thought was very unprofessional. There's been just a lot of things that we heard at the meeting, and I'm just kind of worried about the housing that they're intending to put in there if they do get this. They said that they're wanting to do it equal to what's already around. Well, Observation Point and the other development are very different. So what do they mean similar to? Are they putting in smaller homes here, bigger homes here? It's not, I don't know. There's a lot of things being said that just don't seem to connect. And I feel like, just like the postcard that came out and had the wrong acreage and stuff, my husband and I actually came in and talked to somebody in planning and developing and asked them about some things because we wanted to get some clarification on some of this, and we pointed out that. And then I noticed they put in a thing saying that they needed to fix that, but they didn't resend out postcards or anything to anybody. So as far as everybody knows, there's 10 houses going on 7 acres, because nobody knows unless, anyways. So just a few things. I'm concerned about the street being, he said he thinks that it would be, we would want it to go around. We do not. I'm concerned with water and sewer because they're going to have to plumb into that. Are they going to increase the pressure if there are houses there? Because I don't want my water pressure to go down. Things like that. The sewer, same thing. I'm worried about things. I'm worried about substandard things happening instead of what's actually supposed to go in there and what's, and it being equal to what's already there. And our property values and all that too. So that's kind of where I'm going. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Last call. Anybody else would like to testify on this one? No hands. I'll have the applicant come back forward. No, we've got a few questions for you from the crowd. If you wouldn't mind, state your name and address again for us on the record.
Madam Chair, Dan Lardy, 11 Associates, 1324 First Street South, Nampa, 83687. I wrote some notes, but I want to make sure that I hit all the points that were added there. So the walking path, it meets the city standard. So it's on a 20-foot lot per their request, and it only has to be 14 with landscaping on both sides, and now, per our earlier discussion, fencing. So the fencing is going to be directed by the city. So that's where I'll leave that one. So the next one, sorry, my notes are really bad.
It's all right. We can help you with a few of the questions if you need to. I wrote down a few notes as well.
So there was one comment about the Kachina Estates CCNRs, and as far as being 30 feet away from the existing lot. So that would be on the existing lot, so the parent lot of the 4.35 acres, 30 feet. And we've held back 30 feet all the way around our property on that. There was another question about pathway and why we don't go along the canal, along the 10 Mile Creek. The homeowner, Mr. Marsh, his home actually encroaches in on what the city and Nampa Meridian Irrigation District would want for a pathway to go along there for an easement. They request 50 feet. And right now his house is actually 30 feet from the center line of the canal, which leaves no room for a pathway on that side without demolishing his home. And that's why we're not there. Let's see. So as far as substandard construction, Construction is held to standards by the city, ISPWC, the Idaho Standards for Public Works Construction. So the city does their inspections, and they require us to do our inspections. Home types, we are probably closer with Glacier Bay as far as what we've presented, as far as quality and types of home. That's what I've got for notes. Madam Commissioner,
Okay.
or Madam Chair, can you help me?
I can.
Did I miss anything?
Yes, there was a question from the neighbor that's to your south, I believe. And Bill, if you wouldn't mind flipping back to the plat so we can look at that. There were some concerns about the pathway running along their fence line there. And the fence that they have existing, they're wondering if you might be willing to help replace that so that they'd have, they were also wanting a buffer there for their irrigation. If you could speak to that situation.
So the pathway will, Madam Chair, the pathway will probably be sitting up just a little bit higher, so it'll probably create that natural berm that they were looking for. It's not going to be a 3-foot berm, but it will probably be maybe a foot berm, just if irrigation is really truly the question, and then provide landscaping along their property line, and the fencing will have to meet code.
Would you be open to doing a 3-foot berm there on the edge of the pathway and doing some landscaping on there and help them with their fence?
I would need to ask my client if he would be
Sure.
willing to do that.
Madam Chair, I don't mean to cut into the applicant's time, but I believe there's
do,
going to
Bill.
be a sewer main running through underneath the pathway. Am I correct, Dan? Did you get that worked out with Public Works?
Madam Chair, Bill, the sewer main is not running that direction. It's going to be sewer services under that pathway. Well, actually, it's not under the pathway. It's in an easement along the backside of those lots.
Okay. Okay, so it's going to be outside of the pathway easement, so you can
Yes.
landscape in that area. I just wanted to make sure
No,
that
that's correct.
if it hadn't moved on to the buildable lots, that landscaping could be prohibited if there was a sewer line in there. So I just wanted to clarify that for
Yeah.
the record.
Thank you, Bill. I think we'd be open to hearing from your,
I'm sorry.
I think we'd be open from hearing from your team
Oh.
if they were open to working with the neighbor to the south on those
Are you
requests.
willing to come up?
If you wouldn't mind, when you come up, state your name and address for the record for us, too.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Reckla, and my address is 4123 West Garnett, Boise, 83703.
Thanks, Ryan.
So as far as landscaping and the berm, are they thinking 3 foot tall or 3 foot wide or what?
Well, I think what they explained to us was that they flood irrigate their yard right now, and so they're worried if there's not a berm there.
I
way
don't
that the
think that's an
topography of
issue
their-
to be able to build a little, I mean, because there is, how much of a buffer did we leave? We have a 20-foot easement with a 10-foot walking path with 5 foot on each side, right? As long as you're not opposed in the 5 foot, is this berm on their property or our property? Ours?
I would assume it'd be on your
In-
property.
In a 5 foot wide, 3 foot tall seems like it would be really tall. I mean, like you'd have a peak. Now, I don't mind at all pushing some dirt over there to try and stop it from draining over. I don't know if you necessarily would need 3 foot, seems a little extreme and a little unsightly in a 5 foot path, but if they're not opposed to having part of it on their property too, it's not like there won't be dirt to be able to be moved around. So I don't see working with them on something like that would not be a problem. The fence, so am I getting asked to help with the fence or pay for it all?
It's a great question.
I've heard help. I'm more than happy to do a neighborly good neighbor thing where
Sure.
we each help pay for it.
I believe their question was if you would be willing to pitch in and put in the fence, but certainly we could ask the applicant or ask that specific neighbor to meet with you ahead of city council so you could come up with a solution too. That might be an option.
Yeah, because if it was a joint effort, I would be happy to. So.
Okay,
Any
thank
other
you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission? Seeing none, I think that we've answered most of the questions of the room. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, appreciate it. With that, I would accept a motion to close the public hearing for Bannock Ridge H-2019-0143.
So moved.
Second?
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We are here for deliberation. So if I could have my choice, I'd rather see all three of these lots come in together than have the one piece by itself, because I think it does create some consistency challenges for sure. I'm not opposed to the R4 lot size. I think that seems like a nice fit there. I like that, I'd prefer to see the pathway go along the creek as well, but with the lots, the way that they're laid out in the home that's there, I see the challenge and appreciate that they were willing to reroute that to the south. It's kind of an interesting little infill piece. I'm not sure, I might still need a few more minutes to come up with my thoughts, but I would say at a minimum, I would at least request the applicant to meet with the neighbor to the south to discuss what berm, landscaping, and fencing they would be willing to work on together to create that transition that they'd like. And I see and understand their concern if there's a pathway that runs right next to their property line and a fence there. I would like to see some sort of transition of some sort at least. But that's my starting thoughts. Anyone else want to go next?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
a question for staff. Do you have a picture of where the layout and how the path originally was in the DA agreement?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner McCarville, that's it.
That's it,
The graphic
okay.
on the left.
So-
Yep,
yep.
that green there shows you how the path was run through there on the previous version.
I think one of my other concerns too is because of its size, they're not required to do any open space. And, certainly we can't require them to do open space if they're only 4.3 acres, but I worry about how the next two chunks will develop if there's not open space required here, since that's where a bulk of the open space was originally proposed, was for that block 2 and where the Greenbelt pathway comes down on the north side. So that is a concern I have about this project. Commissioner McCarville, any other thoughts? Not yet?
Still, yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. It definitely changes the landscape of everything to be built along with what everybody around them was expecting.
Commissioner Grove?
Madam Chair, I had a question for staff. In the report, it mentioned something about the existing building in the south being an issue in the south, like too close or something like that. And I can't find it in the report, and so sorry, I'm kind of fumbling to find exactly what I'm asking. But do you know what I'm speaking about?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, yeah, absolutely. So whenever we keep existing structures on properties as part of a subdivision, they have to, when we plat the lot, when we re-subdivide that property and make sure that we're creating new parcel lines around existing structures, they have to comply with the dimensional standards of the code. So we always have a front setback, a side setback, and a rear setback. And we had called that out, that building did not meet the setbacks of the district, so they're gonna have to adjust the plat, the property boundaries of that to make sure that they're complying with the R4 setbacks. And they said they can, and they said they agreed to it, so that's addressed as a condition of approval in the staff report. So yeah, we caught that, and that's why we called it out and brought it to your attention.
Ms. Bill?
Thank you.
Any follow-up comments, Commissioner Grove? Not yet. Commissioner Pitzer?
Yeah, I'm having a lot of problems with this one. I'm thinking this is premature. I think it needs to with the existing structures that are on there. This is just changing the entire face of the original DA and how it's going to flow into the neighboring subdivisions. I especially don't like how the walkway is coming through, and taking out any open space where, in the future, if that was an ACHD issue to have that there, and now it's a buildable lot, it becomes another issue for it.
And I agree, it's hard to see a pathway without the context of what's going to develop around it in the future, because we don't know what that timeline looks like either. Any other thoughts? Commissioner McCarville?
Well, I'm trying to look at it from both ways. If we were to recommend approval on this, I would definitely want to see the berm, and yes, the developer needs to do the fencing. I mean, I just think that's a no-go. I mean, that needs to be consistent. And I think if they're wanting to go while the other land is still in use the way it is, then yeah, there needs to be some berming and I guess start there if we were to prove it as is, but
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm trying to look at it from two different lenses of what it was proposed as and what it would be if it was just coming forward to us, not attached to the DA and not attached to the other development. Coming to us as a standalone piece, I know they're not required to have any open space, and they're big enough lots that they've got their own private yards, but I certainly would have liked to have seen a little bit more open space in there for the future of how it would connect to other subdivisions.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
the original open space lot, was that
Where
all
block-
of that?
Where Block 2
it's-
is, and
that-
also
yeah.
up north,
Right.
where the pathway comes down.
And that was mostly for drainage reasons, wasn't it? And now you want to build homes on there that, I mean, that opens up, I mean, the person who's buying that home 10 years from now is, I mean, where's all that going? Then it puts it on the other two sections that had originally came into the DA agreement thinking that's where their drainage was going.
You can certainly make a condition that they keep that block open as a drainage lot.
Yeah. And I guess I see where the path, okay. So the pathway was not going to exactly follow 10 Mile Creek in the first place, but it was going to be along a lot more open space. Yeah.
Correct, they moved the pathway down south to where that red line is.
Yeah.
And then they added homes between the existing home
Right.
site and the pathway. That will reconfigure how the homes develop south of that line too.
Mm-hmm.
Any more discussion, or certainly happy to take a motion if anyone's close there. This is a tough one for sure.
It's the tough one, yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I just, as we talk about your discretion and the authority that you have, obviously in my presentation, I said the council would be acting on the DA modification, but you always can add DA provisions and change DA provisions. So if it is your pleasure that the developer construct fencing and berming along the pathway, certainly I would, in your recommendation, include it as a DA provision and rather than a plat condition, because it really needs, if you're going to require something more than what code requires, it really needs to be captured in a development agreement, not in a plat.
Sure.
With the plat, we're just looking at conformance with the code. So keep that in mind as you deliberate, and also know that if this plat is what's tied to the current development agreement, so if council doesn't approve the DA mod, the project's a no-go. And the applicant was made aware of that from the very, very early on in the process. A lot of the discussions that I hear you having this evening are the same things we had with them. So I just wanted to give you some of that context too as you deliberate up there.
Thank you, Bill. Again, so we don't get to decide on the development agreement modification. We're just making a recommendation, but we can certainly put some of those provisions in there we'd like to see. I would say that we definitely should add a provision that, perhaps the applicant could meet with the property owner to the south to discuss what options are available, but I don't see it as unreasonable that they have to work on at least putting in a significant portion of the landscaping berm and fence.
Yeah. Yeah, Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville?
I would agree. I mean, it's their change that's going to most affect the property, so it should be, I think, their obligation to protect the property.
Commissioner Pitzer, did you have another comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. I also think that it should be in the provision for Lot 2 to be held as an open lot rather than as a buildable lot.
I would entertain a motion if someone is close to making one. Or if there's any more discussion we need to have on this. Right now, what I've heard is that we'd like to see a DA provision, adding landscaping berm and fence between the pathway and the neighboring parcel to the south. And that we would recommend Block 2, Lot 2 would remain as an open lot for future retention pond or retention space.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Pitzer?
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move that we recommend approval to the City Council of file H2019-0143 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 5th, 2020, with the following modification: a DA approval adding landscaping, berm, and fencing along the perimeter, and retaining Block 2, Lot 2 as remaining as an open lot.
Commissioner Pitzel, can I clarify your motion on the DA? Your recommendation is for a DA provision to add landscaping, berm, and fence to the property that's to the south between the pathway and the lot to the south. Was that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, just some more clarification. It's
Yes, please, Bill.
a little vague with landscaping, berm, and fencing. Obviously, the code's going to require fencing. It's going to require a certain amount of landscaping. As the applicant discussed, you're not going to get, with a 5-foot landscape strip, you're not going to get much of a berm. Probably the largest you're going to get is maybe 18 inches, unless the applicant and the adjacent property owner can agree to different terms. So if it's your desire, then I would say the other thing is the code only requires 1 tree for every 100 linear feet of pathway. So you can see here what they have there. If it's your desire for a certain tree count, I would probably come up with a number or pick something more than just landscaping. So you're to have shrubs, to have end trees there, deciduous trees. I mean, how... I'll leave it up to your discussion, but just something more than just landscaping, berm, and fencing. Fencing I can get. They put in the fencing on both sides of the pathway of that common lot. But what look are you going for there? A berm, 18-inch berm, 24-inch berm? Certainly the code allows, through alternative compliance, the applicant can meander the pathway and have it wider, and so he has the ability to do some nicer landscaping along the pathway. So just throwing out ideas, just need more than just landscaping. We have that now in the plan that we have in front of you.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill, would we be able to add the provision that they work with the property owners as part of that?
Certainly, that's within your prerogative to include that as part of the motion, that they come up with some kind of treatment for that area. Prior to city council, you have that purview too. And we can get that on the record and make sure that not only what the neighbors testify to, but the adjacent property owner gets what they are kind of mentioned to you as far as the drainage issues, making sure they don't trespass on adjacent properties, and they get the privacy that they're afforded under the policies of the comprehensive plan.
So one thing we could look at as a suggestion is we could put more specific requirements in there of what we'd like to see on the landscaping and the buffering. I would agree that 3 foot might be significant there, might be challenging to do on a pathway there, but perhaps we tell them, to do a 2 foot berm there, and that they would meet with the neighbor to the south prior to the city council meeting to see if they can come up with some sort of compromise to present. But our recommendation is if they can't come to a compromise, they would at least be required to put in whatever we decide, whether that's 1 foot, 2 foot buffer, and X number of trees or shrubs along the pathway and fencing on both sides of the pathway. Open for discussion if anyone else has comments. Commissioner Grove?
Madam Chair, I think kind of summarizing, so if we put in language of a berm no less than 18 inches with fencing consistent with the standards on both sides of the pathway, and I don't know if, I really don't want to start counting shrubs right now, so I don't know if I want to add anything specific in that term, but I think at least those conditions and kind of putting it in those terms would make the most sense moving forward.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
the word I keep coming, I'm with Commissioner Grove. I do not want to start, I am the world's worst landscaper, so to visualize exactly how many trees and shrubs, the word I keep coming up with is enhanced. I don't know if that does enough for a motion, though.
And I think
Enhanced landscaping.
I think we could perhaps say enhanced landscaping, but that maybe the property owner to the south and that this developer could work together on what that looks like and present that to council.
Madam Chair, I do like the idea of a meandering path rather than the straight as well. I hope that they will take that into consideration as well.
So with that, we either need a new motion or, I think at this point, to make it clean, we need a new motion.
Need a motion.
So I would entertain a motion from someone if they'd like to, and I can try to recap what we just talked about if you'd like. The couple of things we've talked about was for a DA provision that would create a berm of no less than 18 inches between the property to the south and this development near where the pathway intersects, that we would require fencing to be constructed on both sides of the pathway, and that they would work with the neighbor to the south to come up with an enhanced landscaping solution and present that back to council, and that Lot 2 would remain an open lot rather than a buildable lot. Those are the things I have written down.
And now so does Commissioner Fitzer, so.
Commissioner Pitzer, do you need
Madam
a recap
Chair.
on anything else, or are you good?
Pardon?
You need a recap on anything else? You okay?
Well, we'll give it a try.
All right.
All right, let's do it. Okay. After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to the City Council on file number H201904143 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date March 5th, 2020, with the following modification. DA provision creating no less than a 18-inch berm along the southern property with fencing on both sides of the walkway, and to work with the property owner to the south side to to provide enhanced landscaping with an end berm. Will help.
Did you want to add Lot 2 as an open space lot?
That was the one. Yes, and have Lot 2, Block 2 remain an open lot.
I've got a motion. The motion primarily is to adjust the boundary between the south property owner and the development related to where the pathway comes in, and building a berm, building additional fencing on both sides of the pathway, and an 18 inches minimum berm, and enhanced landscaping. Enhanced landscaping. Do I have a second?
Sorry, Madam Chair, and that's prior to City Council, I take it.
What was that?
Changes prior to City Council.
Yes, correct. That those recommendations would come forward to City Council, and that they would meet prior to City Council. And also that Lot 2 remains open. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Last but not least, we will open the public hearing for Andorra Senior Living, H-2019-0127, and we'll begin with a staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Last item on the agenda this evening is the Andorra Senior Living annexation and vacation application before you. Just like the previous application, the vacation is the responsibility of the City Council, and they will be the recommend body that forwards on a recommendation to ACHD, who's the final decision maker on the vacation application. The subject property consists of 16.99 acres of land currently zoned RUT and R1 in Ada County. It's located at 715, 955 South Wells Street and 971 East Wells Circle at the southwest corner of East Magic View and South Wells Street. Adjacent land uses: to the north, we have single-family residence zoned RUT. South, we have an office park zoned LO. To the east, we have vacant land and single-family residence zoned LO and RUT in Ada County. And then on the west, we have Woodbridge and Locust View Heights subdivisions zoned R4 in the city and R1 in Ada County. It's interesting, this is the first application that I've had a chance to process since the adoption of the new comprehensive plan, and this was what I remember one of the areas that was pretty contentious on what the proposed land uses would be moving forward. Tonight, we have a unique opportunity where we have residents supporting a plan just after we adopted a new plan, so I think that's certainly a commendation to not only the citizens that participated in that plan, but also a commendation to and recognition of your hard work as you sit here and volunteer, sitting here every Thursday, 2 Thursdays a month, listening and making sure that we're providing a premier community for our citizens. The applicant is here tonight again to discuss developing this site with a senior living community, which consists of 76 single and duplex units along the north and west boundaries, and then in the southeast corner, you'll notice that they have a 3-story apartment building, which will have components such as a spa, a salon, a restaurant. As we updated our comprehensive plan, we spent quite a bit of time adjusting our mixed-use standards to make sure that they were better and more understandable for not only you, staff, but also our residents. And this is one of those cases where typically in an MUN designated area, we anticipate smaller footprints. But there are provisions in the comprehensive plan to allow the applicant to increase that square footage based on the design and how well it integrates with adjacent properties. We know this is one component of a larger mixed-use neighborhood area, and moving forward, and when we look at these on a case-by-case basis, we're going to take that under consideration. As I mentioned to you, there's already office in the area, there's hotels in the area, there's existing single-family homes in the area, and this will be one integrated component of that mixed-use area. Looking at the open space that they're proposing and that public amenity of the pathway coming through the central location of the site, staff felt it was prudent to allow the applicant that increase in from 20,000 square foot building footprint to the 30,000 for the 3-story apartment complex. Also make mention that the restaurant is on the north side of that building as well, and that's approximately 6,000. So if you look at the aggregate of that footprint, we're talking 36,000 square feet. And again, we feel this is within the right context and meets the mixed-use standards of the comprehensive plan. The other unique thing about this property, as you saw on that map, is there's two different land use designations. A portion of it, approximately 9 acres, is medium-density residential. The portion where this larger structure sits is that 8 acres, approximately 8 acres of mixed-use neighborhood. Again, looking at the overall entire development, staff finds that it is consistent with that newly adopted future land use map. Access to this site is unique as well. As you heard through the comprehensive plan update, there have been some access challenges with this development in this area, and this particular use is no different. The good thing about this is typically this type and this style of development has less trip generation, which we've all heard over the years and years how limited access is here. But we do want to preserve connectivity in areas. So one of staff's recommended changes to the concept plan that's before you this evening is to actually stub at Wells Circle, which is the cul-de-sac along the south boundary. So if you can see my cursor, you can see currently that there is a hammerhead turnaround at the terminus of that road and then some green space. Staff does not have ACHD staff report on this application. I know the applicant has been working in conjunction with ACHD staff to determine how that road would terminate in the future with this project. He did communicate to me this evening that they are agreeable to deviating from their standards and allow this configuration that's before you this evening. I don't have written confirmation of that, nor have I received an email to that effect. But as a recommended DA provision, we have required that the applicant extend this road in accordance with ACHD's requirements. Also, as part of this application, there is some right-of-way that's being vacated. It doesn't show up very well on this particular concept plan, but if I can step back, I can show you where the general proximity of that is basically right in the middle of the project. There was some unnamed right-of-way that was dedicated with the subdivision back in 1983 in the county. As I alluded to it in the staff report, this is not required for access to this proposed development, so staff is supportive of the right-of-way being vacated, and we have made that recommendation to City Council. Access for this particular property will come from the adjacent local streets, and then for internal circulation, the applicant's actually proposing gated private streets, which is consistent with it's allowed under the UDC. What the applicant will have to do moving forward, this is one of those unique situations with the TNR zone that they're requesting the annex in with. Multifamily, or all of these uses are principally permitted. So once the DA is in place, the zoning's in place, the applicant will only have to go through staff approvals, and that's why it's critical that the applicant worked with the neighborhood, because there won't be another chance to talk about this development once zoning's in place. In the staff report, I made mention of multiple alternative compliance applications that the applicant will have to go through. Specifically, there's some common drives that take access off the private streets. That's currently prohibited unless approved through alternative compliance. There's more than 50 units off a gated access, which will require that alternative compliance to our private street standards. And then in the narrative of the application and on this concept plan, the applicant had specified that they may want to provide smaller balconies for the residents in the apartment portion of the development. And again, that is also eligible for alternative compliance, which are all staff level approvals. So again, the use itself at staff level, any deviations from those standards would only require staff level approval. The applicant also went into great detail as far as what the architecture is going to be as part of the development. So they've given you a representation of what the apartment complex is going to look like, the restaurant component, which fronts onto that open space in the 5 Mile Creek and the pathway. And then here's some of the attached units and the single-family units with, again, that cohesive design theme that we envision in a mixed-use area. One of the items that I did point out to you in your staff report is this, again, this is part of a subdivision that was recorded in the county. There are parcel boundary lines that need to be shifted through, again, a property boundary adjustment, which is a staff level approval, and there's platted easements that were created with that subdivision. Because the applicant's not subdividing the property at this time and only requesting annexation, those platted easements that were created with that subdivision in 1983 have to be vacated. So although we're vacating the right-of-way, we have a vacation application to vacate right-of-way tonight, that vacation is separate, a different vacation process from vacating right-of-way process. So there is a DA provision that they need to get that completed prior to getting any approvals from the city moving forward. Because this property has been here for a while and the city has what's interesting about this property is there's some existing sewer easements on some of the parcels as well. And that does impact some of the site design, and the applicant's been informed of that and been asked to reach out to Public Works prior to the city council hearing so that we can make sure that what they're proposing will work for not only you, but also the city. So if I can just highlight, if you can see my cursor here, so currently there's an easement that runs east-west through the property here. It goes across one of the lots, and then when it's in that unnamed right-of-way, it's in right-of-way. So the applicant's going to have to work with the city. If the right-of-way is vacated, he's going to have to create a separate easement document in favor of the city to maintain access to our utilities. And then also along the west boundary of the site, a portion of it, right about midway up to the site along this west boundary here, there's an existing trunk line that runs through the development that serves portions of South Meridian. So it's going to be difficult and expensive to move that trunk line. And so that was conveyed to the applicant that we need typically on those types of easements, we like a gravel road so that the vac truck can get to the manholes. But the applicant's going to work and see if they can landscape that, somehow enhance that as part of the development, realizing that they have to maintain that access for Public Works. So you also notice in the staff report, I also noted that their applicant's proposing 22.8% open space. Again, this is conceptual at this point. Don't have any open space exhibits to demonstrate that. But moving forward, and the recommended provision in the development agreement is that the applicant comply with UDC standards as far as open space and site amenities. Some of the amenities that they called out on the concept plan include a clubhouse, a fitness facility, restaurant, spa, salon, internal walking trails, a pool, open grassy areas, community gardens, and also various sports court, bocce ball, putting greens. So you can see that they're actually gearing towards that retirement lifestyle, if you will, and trying to provide a rich amenity package for this proposed development, which staff is, again, supportive of. The applicant will have to go through that process and comply with standards and make sure we'll verify all that with the certificate of zoning compliance process. But one thing unique about this development is it is still classified as multifamily in our zoning code. And so the one thing that I want the commission to at least take under advisement this evening is the amenity package and the open space, because that is a very critical component of our multifamily developments that we hear over time and time again at these hearings is what's the open space? Is there enough? And certainly when we get into 164 units like this particular development, it doesn't fall onto staff to make that determination. It falls onto this body to make that determination. And that's why I highlight that for you this evening, because I can tell you the open space and the amenities is greater than what code allows, but we want to make sure that the applicant does have some sort of commitment to what they want to do on the site, not just, well, we may want to do this, we're thinking about that. We at least want to have something, some certainty from the developer as to what they're willing to commit to as far as open space and that amenity as we transition to staff level approvals. In the staff report, I did note that there was some public testimony for you to take under consideration, and hopefully you had a chance. Again, most of it was in support of the project. Staff did not receive any written testimony from the applicant on the application, but we are recommending approval with a development agreement. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and stand for any questions you may have.
One question. So on the slide you just flipped from with the individual units, they would be for rent, not for sale. Is that my understanding? Because otherwise they would have to go through a plat process, or because it's multifamily, they're exempt from doing that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, the way the code defines multifamily is just the number of units on a single parcel. It doesn't speak to design.
Sure.
So in this particular case, yeah, those would be for rent. We've discussed the possibility of them coming back later and subdividing it and then selling off the units. And the concept plan that they provided has some preliminary lot lines on there with setbacks, because they want to make sure what they're proposing here works. Right. If they wanted to subdivide it. But at this point, it's not their intent to sell these off at this time, but they will, as far as I know, rent those out to a 55 and older demographic.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Grove.
Madam Chair. Bill, during a lot of the comprehensive plan, that whole 18 months or whatever, a lot of time was spent on this section. And one of the biggest pieces of conversation was about connecting Locust Grove to Eagle in some form or fashion with roadways, and being able to address how that is considered over the long term. With this development, it looks like it eats up a major portion of where that would be possible moving forward. Did staff take a look at that concept in relation to this development?
So, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Grove, we did. And we are very upfront with the developer that our primary purpose, one of the objectives with this development is to make sure that Stubb Street, if you see the concept plan here, this mouse isn't going down there, but that is going to be a Stubb Street. He's going to dedicate right of way to make sure that if and when that adjacent subdivision redevelops in the future, consistent with our plan, and something else happens there other than a county development, that road would punch through and tie back into Locust Grove. That is a critical component to this development. And the applicant is going to work with ACHD. As I mentioned to you, this is probably the design that it's going to look like, but through a license agreement, they're still going to dedicate the right-of-way, and then through a license agreement, they'll be able to do some of these improvements and use that until such time as the road is extended, is how that usually works.
Thank you.
So Bill, one follow-up to that. If that was the case that wells would get extended in the future, could we make a condition that no lots would have driveways facing wells?
Certainly, Madam Chair, members of the commission, yeah, absolutely. We don't want anything fronting on that because it will become essentially a de facto collector. At that point, you open that up to Eagle and Locust Grove, you're going to get some traffic through there. So yeah, I don't think, I can see what you're saying with those one units fronting on there. They could maybe orient them differently. Something the applicant could maybe address for you this evening.
Sure.
It's a good thought.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions for staff? With that, I will have the applicant come forward and share with us a little bit. Is the applicant here? Trying to decide who's going to speak. You drew the short stick? If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for us, we'd appreciate it.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Clay Samus. I live at 133 Simpson in Ketchum, Idaho. I apologize, I was talking to my architect, so I'm here to answer questions, but if, is that what did you have questions?
We would allow you to, you've got up to 15 minutes if you have anything else you want to share beyond what staff shared with us.
We're going to tag team this together.
Perfect.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address to the record for us as well.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thanks for letting us be here tonight. Jeremy Garner, my address is 489 East Lockhart here in Meridian. Before I forget though, my partner reminded me, I want to thank the homeowners that we have been working with in both Woodbridge and Locust View Heights. They've been very supportive of us. We did go through the process of doing several neighborhood meetings, and we've been the beneficiaries of becoming what we hope to be really good neighbors with them through this project. So obviously, concept for this plan, Meridian continues to be a destination for retirement with the mild climate, and we feel that this project here is very well suited for what we want to do and how much we feel strongly about this particular product and how well it will do here. So obviously the Bill did a good job laying out exactly what we want to try to accomplish with this product, and you'll notice I'm glad he talked about the open space and the amenities, which I think hit on what really is needed in this valley and for this particular target market, which we feel very strongly about as well. So stand for any other questions that you may have. I know I'm sure I'm missing something, but.
Any questions for the applicant? believe we'll have some public testimony, so we'll give you guys a chance to come
Okay.
back up in a little bit if we have more questions for you.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it. Madam Clerk, I believe we have several signed in for testimony tonight.
Madam Chair, we do. We have 7 people signed up that signed in, but none wish to testify.
Is there anyone in here that would like to testify? I see one hand in the back. If you want to come forward. That's okay. If you didn't sign in, you can still come forward, and we'll just have you put your name and address on the record, and you've got 3 minutes to share with us.
Okay. Maybe give me a titch longer since I don't know how to work this. I can't really see this very well, but I would like to. I would like to try. Could somebody
Yeah,
give me a quick
if you
little
wouldn't mind,
tutorial?
go ahead. If you wouldn't mind pulling the mic down towards you and then saying your name and address for the record.
Monica McKinley, 1080 South Torino Avenue, and I'm in Meridian.
Okay.
I would like to start out by showing you where I live, but I don't know how to work this. Could somebody please tell me how to click back into the bigger picture? Hopefully this won't take away from my 3 minutes. Nope. Nope. Right there, that one right there. Okay. This piece of, this R1 that is right here, that is adjacent to here, I believe this is the subdivision that they said that they had contacted and that they were working with. Am I correct in saying that? Okay. This is my house right here. I've lived here for 25 years. We have not been contacted by them whatsoever. He just stood up here and stated that they've had neighborhood meetings with us. That is not true. We've not had a single neighborhood meeting with them. He has not contacted anybody in my neighborhood. As far as I know, they've contacted these 4 homes right here, and that's it. So we were not given any notification at all about what they were doing. Tonight is the first time that I have been, that I've seen any of the development. The first time, I haven't even been contacted. The only reason that I know about this is because I was told by one of these 4 people that this meeting was coming. So for them to stand up here and say that they've had meetings with our neighborhood, that's not true. For them to say that they've been working with us, that's not true. They may have had contact with maybe 1 or 2 people on this back lot, but that's not true at all. I would specifically like to talk about this sub-street, this sub right here. I am not necessarily opposed to any of this other than the rental part. If it's rentals versus seniors purchasing, that's a different story. But this stub street right here is very important to me because in the comprehensive plan, how do I go back? I don't know what I did.
Bill, can you click back 2 slides for her? One more.
One more. Yeah, thank you. So in the comprehensive plan, they have a provision to put a road right through my front yard that goes as a frontage road right through I-84 that would connect and go right here. So if our neighborhood were to have a meeting with the developers, we would want to make sure that there would not be any stub roads out this direction because we do not want to be annexed into the city. We want to remain R1. And this has been a big contention as Mr. Parsons probably is very well aware of. And as he stated that, you also stated that there were empty lots. Could you please tell me where the empty lots are? When you made your statement, you said that there was empty lots to the west.
Sure. No, ma'am, just to the north. I said the north had single-family residence, but to the east were the vacant lots and the single-family residence.
Okay, all right. I misunderstood then. I thought you meant the third. So anyway, so my public testimony is that is that we were not given any kind of notification that this project is being done at all.
Okay.
We weren't notified, and if this is to be approved this evening, at least some of us in here that we would like to be notified, and we would like the stub roads removed in the plans. And we want to make sure that the, this portion here, why does it keep doing that? I'm trying, this portion right here remains open space and not a road, because we don't want a road here through our subdivision, and we do not want the stub roads here that affects our house.
We're past time, and I really
Okay.
appreciate
All right.
your comments. And
Do you have any
thanks for being
questions?
here. I'll answer a couple of the questions that you had. So if you're located on the west side of the Locust View subdivision.
I'm in Locust View subdivision.
Correct. So they have, whenever there's a development that comes forward, they have certain noticing requirements they have to meet by code. So they're required to post signage on their sites, and they're also required to do a 300-foot radius of the proposed property, proposed development boundaries. So it's likely that you were outside of that 300 feet, which is probably why you didn't receive any notification.
Well, we're all 1 acre parcels, so there's 63 parcels in this square. There's
Right.
63. So when they say that they've notified our subdivision, that's not true. And when he says that they were working with our subdivision,
Right.
that's not true either.
They're required to hold a neighborhood meeting for anybody that receives a postcard within the 300 feet.
They did not have a meeting.
Right.
They did not have that.
Well,
There was no neighborhood meeting.
I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that'd like to testify? Please come forward.
My name is Pat Renison, and I live at 990 Mustang Street. I'm on, my backyard is adjacent to this development, and I have written a letter in support of them. It is true that the people on the west side were not sent the cards. Only the Mustang Street were the only ones that received postcards for this. And they have had 2 meetings, and some of us did attend on Mustang Street. We did attend those meetings. And so that has. Also, Ryan and Glenna Newby that are about 3 doors down from Mrs. McKinley, they send out a news email that this was going to happen tonight, and several people have come tonight in support of this subdivision. We are happy, and we do agree with Mrs. Newby, though, that, Mrs. Newby, whoops, of Mrs. McKinley, that stub street, we do not wish that to go through. And we don't. Eventually, I know that was in the comprehensive plan. We've been very active for over a year now, since February 12th of last year, of not having a through street come through our subdivision. Because at this point, we're a contained subdivision with only the one street in, period. And it has made it a very cohesive neighborhood. We have 4 families that are 3 generations in our neighborhood, where the children have grown up, their children have married, come back, and are now raising their children in the neighborhood. And that is one reason we don't want it to be a thoroughfare. So thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Last call, anyone else like to testify? We've got one more here in the back. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Barbara Valdez. I live at 2220 East Continental. I live in Locust View Heights subdivision, about the middle of the subdivision. I would withdraw my letter of approving of the subdivision based on the fact that this stub road would, as Pat has said, destroy our subdivision. We indicated our approval for the subdivision because Cadillac Drive would not have been extended with this development. We were unaware, either in the presentation or in our maybe failure to study the development, that a stub road was included in it. It was not emphasized, and I emphasized to the developers that we wanted to preserve our subdivision. No notice was made, no attention called to the stub road, which was a major feature changing our entire subdivision. So as much as I'm able to approve of that subdivision or support it for environmental reasons, for preserving the stream, for construction of the buildings themselves, I cannot support it because of the effect on traffic, quiet neighborhoods, and the fact that the diversity that's represented by their piece, Woodbridge piece, and our piece would be lost, and it would become a victim of commercial development, which none of us really, buffering one another, would benefit from. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Before the applicant comes back, I might just take a second to answer a couple of the questions that were concerned here. One note is having this development come in does not change the zoning of the neighborhood in Locust View Heights, and nor does it put a road through there. The stub road is something that's typically required from ACHD, and they'd certainly would have to, this development would have to meet whatever standards ACHD would require. But it's simply that it would be a stub road, it would end, and the road would not go through unless there was another redevelopment that happened. So if the neighbors decided they wanted to stay in their 1 acre lots, there would be nothing that would change that in the future unless they were to sell and a new developer would come in to build something there. So just wanted to put that out there. This doesn't mean putting a stub road there doesn't mean that it's going to be a road that goes through Locust View Heights. It just means that if it was ever to redevelop 100 years from now, there would be the ability to have interconnectivity with the road to the east. So I just wanted to point that out there as a comment. And I know I talked a little bit about the public noticing process, but developments are required to do a 300-foot radius for where the postcards go to. They do have to have their neighborhood meetings. They have signs posted on the property saying that they're going to come forward for a rezone or for an annexation. So it's always unfortunate if you live outside of that boundary and you haven't heard about it, but I'm glad you were able to be here today so you could share some of your thoughts with us, so we appreciate that. With that, I'll ask the applicant to come back forward if they'd like to address any other further concerns, have other comments that they'd like to share with us. And if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record again, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, Jeremy Garner, 489 East Lockhart, Meridian.
I got a response. Yeah. Clay Samus, at 1 through 3 Simpson, Ketchum, Idaho. I'm feeling horrible, actually, because our proposal is exactly kind of what the neighbors at Locust were talking about. We have a cul-de-sac currently in the southern portion. If we can pull up the site plan, I don't know if I go back one or forward. But there's a current cul-de-sac not shown here in order to access our site. We have been representing that there's an extension of the right-of-way for extending the cul-de-sac. We're trying to get it to be a hammerhead. To just elaborate on the deal points with ACHD, they have just today agreed to do a cul-de-sac with a hammerhead within it. So the hammerhead meets the fire code, which we already worked out with the building fire marshal, and then the cul-de-sac will meet ACHD. So I too believe a fence at the end and a little bit of landscaping right at the end, because of the unforeseen time that this would be extended, if it would be extended when 30, 40, or 100 lots get purchased and a road gets put through all at once. Again, that's where we landed, that's what I've always represented. So we have extended our cul-de-sac to access the houses on the west side of the property. And I think, again, you've already elaborated on the couple meetings we had, and I believe my last statement addresses my representation to Mrs. Valdez and then also for Mrs. McKinley. Do you have any?
Yeah, if I could just say as well, we followed all of the regulatory guidelines for noticing through the whole process. So I apologize if we weren't clear on any of that, but I think we've met those standards in our application process. So
Appreciate that.
Do you have any other questions for us while we're here, or?
Any questions for the applicant? Everyone's jumping up and down to ask questions, so I think you guys are set.
thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
And again, thank you for staff and Bill. I didn't get a chance to thank both the commissioners and staff for working on this project with us and the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McCarville.
Madam Chair, I move we close the public hearing on H-2019-0127.
Got a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Commissioner McCarville, do you want to go first?
Sure. I love this. I think this looks like a great addition into this area, kind of just exactly what it needs. It is, I know we've had some, quote, multifamily proposals in this area before, but this is night and day from what was proposed a few years ago up around the corner. Even though it's technically multifamily, I think it's beautiful. I think it's in the right location. I love the amount of green space and close to everything. I mean, having senior living arrangements close to all the medical and a lot self-contained as far as activities and even a restaurant that limits traffic even more. Going from back there, I do think it is important. That street that is going to be a dead-end street, but preparing for what may happen 20, 40, 60, 80 years in the future. I think it's important to keep those ways open for potential. Otherwise, you close everything off permanently. But I love it with the open space, and especially our chair's comments about putting in the that no lots face wells, just for those exact future options.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Pitzer.
I agree with Commissioner Carville. I love this. I mean, this is a great concept plan. Not only that, it's close to medical. I want to move there myself. You know, it's beautiful. As far as the substreet, don't sell your property, then it won't go through. But yeah, we need to plan for the future. But this is, I have no negative comments for this project as I see it.
Thank you. Commissioner Grove.
So I'm pretty interested in this. Having sat through a lot of the comprehensive plan, seeing the mixed use designation used, in particular in this fashion, that fits with the dynamic around it in terms of other residential, commercial, hospital roads. I think this makes sense, and it's well laid out, well thought through. I really like how they've thought of the different aspects to make this function as an entire concept coming in. And I like the open space as well, especially along 5 Mile Creek. So I'm definitely in favor of this project.
I would echo a lot of the comments made. I always like seeing mixed-use concepts, and I like that there's a lot of amenities here. One thing Bill mentioned in his staff report is that he'd like us to give some specifics on what amenities and open space we'd like to see if this moves forward, because if they are, the only owner will not come back in front of us as a plat. It'll just be this development, so that might be something we want to consider. I would still stand on not wanting to have any lots face wells, just for long-term planning sake. But again, I stand by the comments I made earlier that there's no intention for that road to go through right now. There's no, I mean, I don't see that road going through in even 5 to 10 years unless somebody was to sell their lots and see something else come through there. It's not going to be immediate. It's just planning for future in case that ever happens at some point. So again, same comment. If you know, those 1 acre lots stay in place, there's not going to be a need for a road to go through there. It's only in case that there would be a development that happens at some point in the future, whether that's 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. They could stay exactly the same with no changes there. So I always appreciate when we get comments from the public. I want to thank you for the letters of testimony we got. We want to thank you for the folks that have shown up here to wait it out with us till 8 o'clock in the evening on a Thursday night. Overall, I like the concept as well. I like that there's lots of walking paths throughout the neighborhood. It seems like an adequate transition from the residential that's there. It's not going to be it's targeted at 55 and older, I believe, for the entire development. So it's not going to be a super active area with lots of kids running around. It'll be a quieter subdivision, and I think it's a nice transition for what's in the vicinity. So with that, I don't know how we quantify what amenities and open space we want to see in there, but I know in the staff report there was a list of what types of amenities are required in multifamily developments, and some comments that perhaps we could give a recommendation of how many of those we wanted to see come forward.
Madam Chair?
I think Bill has a comment.
Sorry.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, certainly you can do it multiple ways. One is, I was hoping you'd ask the applicant what they would commit to, but you can open it up and ask what they're willing to commit to as part of the record, and we'll move forward with that. Or you can look at the list there and say you like all of them, or the ones that got to be there, they have to be there, and we can include that in the development agreement.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I wish I'd asked that question before too.
Madam
Commissioner
Chair.
Pitzer? I'm sorry. Commissioner Pitzer, I think, had a comment earlier too.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I was going to ask Bill, is keeping the balconies and the patios, is that something that we could put in as part of that?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, certainly. I mean, the way the code is written right now, the multifamily units have to have a minimum square footage of private patio or open yard, some kind of front porch, a patio, and it's 80 square feet. So if you want all the units to have that or comply with right now the code, the way I have the DA structure says you comply unless you go through the alternative compliance. So if you want to strike that from the DA provision, you're welcome to do that, and I can tell you what DA provision that is and what to get rid of if you don't want them to seek that.
Okay, and
process.
for the multi-story, that holds true for the multi-story?
Yeah, it would be for all the units, have to meet that standard.
Okay.
The single-family style and the apartment style. Let me look that up for you really quick.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. Commissioner McCarville?
I would be open to opening the hearing again to some commitments from the applicant on amenities and open space.
I would certainly entertain a motion if you'd like to do so.
I so moved.
Motion to reopen the public hearing to hear just from the applicant on open space. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second?
Can't second it.
You can't second it.
I know, I
but
can't second it.
Nick can, so.
I was
all
good-
right.
I was
Commissioner
excited.
Grove seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Would the applicant please come back forward and speak with us a little bit about open space?
So, Madam Chair, members of the commission, while the applicant comes back up for some additional testimony, it looks like it's DA provision E, and it would be item number 3. Multifamily private usable open space standards. You'd want to strike that from that DA provision if you want them to comply with the 80 square feet per code.
I could speak to the open space, which I guess addresses, really, it's intended for Well, I like the term open space because.
Would you mind stating your name one more time just for the recorder? I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
No, thank you, Clay Samus.
Thank you.
We're near double the open space, so we've taken some areas that would normally be on balconies and created gatherings. I'm going to speak specifically to the apartment because I believe we can meet the 80 square feet on all the cottages. It's just the apartment, if you think of 80 square feet where you might have a 4-foot deck, that's 20-foot long deck. I think we can't afford 20-foot long decks per unit. We do have a deck per unit, so we can have a deck for each unit, and many of them are on the ground floor that may spill out to become more than 80 square feet. But I think the design, in my mind, reads well. It's broken up well with balconies, and we don't have an entire line of the whole frontage being balconies. So I would ask you to consider allowing us to work with staff to come up with good design and decks that work functionally for these seniors, but aren't 4 by 20 feet long. Because typically on this type of multi-story building, you don't cantilever out or go out 10 feet for a deck. So the other was on the amenities. It's probably a number because we won't commit to doubling the amenities, but just by the nature of the senior housing and our use and our 55 plus and the way we've laid out this that's what's going to separate us from the competitors. That's what's important to us is fitness, the hiking trails for the outdoor, for just mindful awareness and good health, and so including in typically we would have a spa and a salon. And you can speak to the fitness center as its own building. So, yes, that's intended to be a fitness center and clubhouse for the north. I know that we can meet and exceed the amenities, but specifically which ones, I would love some flexibility, and
sure.
Maybe it's a quantity that we're talking about.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Jeremy Garner, 489 East Lockhart, Meridian. Having been in the industry, senior living industry, and knowing on an apartment style, multifamily style complex like this, you will have a certain number of residents who don't want or would rather have the space inside per se than to have an actual outside patio. But for those folks, we have on particular floors, we will have surveillance decks or outdoor areas that they can actually go out and look over certain parts of the area north of there. So there will be public access to places in the building where they can actually go out and look and not necessarily have one in their individual unit per se. And we'd like the flexibility to be able to offer that. And then as far as amenities go, in order for us to be competitive, I think we go well beyond what the requirements are in the development agreement or what's in the code currently with what we're trying to offer here. And I think the open space obviously is one that we really feel strongly about. It kind of goes back to what our vision mission statement is for what we want Andorra to be. And we really do feel very strongly about the fact that there's a therapeutic concept to having outdoor space and to being outdoors. And so it really does play into what we want to utilize as our marketing strategies and having this be a place for people to really want to be a part of.
And I think all of us see that you've got an interest in having really nice amenities and a really nice subdivision or concept here. What would you feel comfortable with on number of amenities that we would put in there? And I think it's just to have a safeguard moving forward that things wouldn't change after it moves out of here.
Offhand, like 6 to 8.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if we're calling like the spa, salon, the fitness area, the outdoor pickleball, walking paths, I think 6 to 8 is probably. I think we can exceed that actually, but if you could keep it at that, then we can really probably work with you on that.
So would you feel comfortable if we said we wanted to make sure we saw 20% open space and 6 amenities? That would be reasonable to you?
We've always represented the way we understand the code to hit like 20%. Not having done an exhibit, I guess I look back at the architects, you know, but again, they've done just the exhibit based on the site plan. So we haven't, you know, for all the areas that count or don't count, and it's back to the amenities. Like our amenities might be, you know, might have 12, but per the code, you might only call those 8. So that's kind of where I would want to say we can do near double. But to say absolutely we have 20, I mean, we should have 10% cushion from what we've calculated. But I would ask for something in between if you could consider that, so we have a safety net, and we will strive for 20. We're currently sitting at 22. If it's calculated the same way we did it, well, then we meet it, because we don't intend to peel back open space.
Great. Any other questions for the applicant? I think that's it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
With that, I need a motion to close the public hearing again.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
move to close the public hearing on H-2019-0127.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? I think after hearing what they said, I don't know that I feel like we need to strike the DA E3 requirement. I think letting them work with staff to find packages that would be appropriate, it seems fine to me, because I think having a 800-foot balcony on each unit seems like a lot. 80, that's what I meant. 800 would be really a lot. That'd be quite some engineering, so let's see what that would look like. Yeah, I think 80 feet would be, I'd say let's just let them work with staff on the decking per unit, because it sounds like their intent is to have a deck on each unit and have some other viewing areas, and I'd much rather see larger
I agree.
common decks.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree. I was just concerned about another development we went through, and we didn't have anything in there, and there was 0.
We could certainly look at putting in a condition that says we'd like every unit to have a deck and leave that at that. I don't know that I even want to get that close. But I just say I would rather have them work with staff to find an appropriate solution that meets code and creates a nice product.
I agree. I think if we follow the concept that we're looking at, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville.
I agree. I think they know their market, and I think working with staff and to have some apartments, I mean, that just maybe have more indoor space rather than outdoor and use of the common. And I agree with the representation of this, and I think the only reason to have to put in the number of amenities and open space is, like you said, just to safeguard. I think they're going to do a fabulous job, and just since we don't get another stab at this, then I think that's the only reason.
And I struggled on whether or not we should put a percentage on the open space. I said 20 because they proposed 22.8, but again, that wasn't calculated with an actual plat, so I'm not sure what would count as acceptable open space. But Bill, if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, my spider sense went off, so I figured I better chime in. Difficult for 20%, and I'm going to tell you why. Is because the calculations, there's a ratio there, and don't have all of those details yet. So I don't know if they're going to come in at 18%, 15%, 22%. It's up in the air right now. That's why in the DA provisions, I said they just need to comply with code, because we don't know what that number is. I don't know what's qualified as open space and what isn't at this point. In the multifamily standards, it has to be 20 by 20 and 400 square feet to count. So we're gonna have to measure between each of the units and figure out what that is. So I don't want to commit to a solid number. All I wanted to do is just bring it to your attention that we do have a higher quality development and a very rich amenity package for this development. We're talking clubhouse, multiple sports courts. All of those things meet the criteria of a multifamily development. I just don't want things to happen where, for example, we have an expectation for a clubhouse, and all of a sudden we're getting a plaza with a gazebo.
Right.
That's not in an equal like-for-like amenity. And that's happened, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen in this particular case. Yes, I've worked with the developer. I understand their commitment here, but I wanted something definitive. We're going to do a fitness facility. We're going to do a clubhouse. We're going to do a pool. We're going to do, they have to do the pathway. They're going to do interconnected walkways. I agree. They have to do that. They want to link. That's part of the mixed-use standards. You've got to connect this development and make it integrated. I don't see that changing. What I get concerned with is just watering down things once they start crunching numbers and figuring the actual costs out. And this, like you said, this is a pretty nice project. And if you guys are comfortable with just saying as proposed, we can do that, and we can figure it out later and work with staff, or say even 10 or 12 amenities isn't going to get it done for me. I mean, their concept plan calls out these amenities, and so I'm not sure whether the salon and spa falls into that. To me, that's just more of a function of the use so I don't know if I would classify those as amenities per the multi-use standards or multifamily standards and open space standards. But certainly all the other things that they're proposing certainly would classify. So again, the concept plan calls out those things. If you want to tie them to that, it's certainly within your purview. If you're comfortable with what I have them just complying with code and we can work those out, I'm happy with that as well. I've got it covered either way.
Thanks, Bill.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville.
Bill is saying some verbiage such as amenities and open space as represented by the applicant. Does that get you close enough to some teeth into this or not?
I don't want to get in a situation where staff has to go back to the public record to figure out what your interpretation was. We need to have black and white on this development agreement, because we don't have another bite at the apple unless it gets, obviously the agreement can be amended. What we can do is, moving forward to city council, the applicant can bring forward a more detailed list for them to take under consideration. That may be the more flexible route to go at this point.
Okay.
And I think one thing we could do is, list certain amenities that they've listed here that we think are non-negotiables. So I would say I'd feel comfortable saying we would like to make sure that they come back with at least 6 amenities, including a clubhouse, a fitness facility, walking trails, open grassy areas. And if we wanted to name a couple other things, whether you want the restaurant, the pool. I know restaurants can be tough in a development like this, so I don't know that I want to necessarily tie them to that. It could end up being that they just do a coffee shop there at some point. Or, maybe they find that a neighborhood store makes more sense for some of the residents, some sort of convenience location. I want to leave that up to their interpretation too, but.
Exactly. It could be a business center, or somebody wants to run a business out of there. You just don't know at this point. There's a lot of options here that they just don't know. The market's going to drive that a little bit, and they're going to know that better than we will.
But I think if we want to be specific in including a couple of those things, I'd say making sure we have a clubhouse, fitness facility listed, connected walking trails with open grassy areas. Those are the ones that seem most important to me, and that they would have a minimum of 6 to 8 amenities.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville.
Do we have a thought on the amount of open space you want to tie this to?
I don't think so. I think you leave it to what code requires and have them work with staff.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? I would certainly entertain a motion if someone wants to try one.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville.
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council file number H-2019-0127 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of March 5th, 2020, with the following modifications, that no lots, with the addition of no lots facing wells, and that the open space meet minimum code and close to represented by the applicant, along with 6 to 8 amenities, including clubhouse, fitness center, and trails with open grassy areas. To work with staff on the remainder.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Andorra Senior Living is moving forward to council. Thank you. With that, I believe we just have one more motion of the evening.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.